These people were so rich they crashed economies, owned empires, and rewrote history. Let's count down the wealthiest ever. Let's kick off our journey through the richest people in history with a man who literally saved a country with his fortune, Stephen Girard. He wasn't born into wealth. Girard arrived in America as a poor, half-blind French sailor with barely anything in his pocket. Fast forward a few decades, and he became one of the wealthiest men in early American history. By the time he died, his fortune was worth what would be around $105 billion today. So, how did he do it? Girard made his money through smart investments, shipping, and most importantly, banking. During the War of 1812, the US government was flat broke. Banks had collapsed. The country needed cash, and fast. Girard stepped in, using millions of his own money to fund the war effort. He literally lent the government the money it needed to survive. He also founded one of the first private banks in the United States, and it became the engine that kept the economy running during tough times. Next up is Richard Mellon, a name that quietly helped build America's industrial core. Born into Pittsburgh's powerful Mellon family, Richard wasn't just riding on his older brother Andrew's coattails, he was a banking titan in his own right. At the peak of his wealth, his fortune would be worth around $110 billion today. He played a massive role in growing Mellon Bank, and financed companies that transformed steel, oil, and coal into massive industries. Richard wasn't a headline chaser, but he was one of the country's key power players, shaping entire sectors from behind the scenes. Ever heard of Alcoa or Gulf Oil? He had his hands in those. His investments were quiet but heavy-hitting, growing steadily while others took bigger risks. With nearly invisible influence, Mellon's name might not spark instant recognition today, but his money helped carve out the backbone of American business. And that's no exaggeration. Stephen Van Rensselaer made his fortune not by building, but by inheriting massive chunks of land. He was one of the last true feudal-style landowners in America. At the peak of his wealth, his holdings would be valued at roughly $120 billion. His estate stretched across hundreds of thousands of acres in New York State, and he rented out these lands to tenant farmers, raking in profits for decades. The Van Rensselaer name became almost untouchable in upstate New York. What made his empire unique is that it wasn't built on factories or banks. It was built on land, and lots of it. His political career helped him maintain that influence, but make no mistake, his wealth came from what he owned, not what he ran. For years, entire communities paid rent to just one man. That man was Stephen Van Rensselaer, the quiet giant of old money real estate. Alexander Turney Stewart wasn't a tycoon of steel, railroads, or oil. He became one of the richest men in American history by selling fabric. Yes, fabric. Stewart revolutionized shopping by founding what many consider to be the first real department store in the United States. He brought in an estimated $150 billion in today's dollars. In the mid-1800s, his store was a marvel, massive glass windows, fixed prices, and wide selections. People had never seen anything like it. His marble palace in New York City became a shopping destination and a money machine. Stewart turned retail into a gold mine. He even dabbled in mail-order business long before Amazon existed. His death led to a bizarre twist. His body was stolen for ransom, but while his remains disappeared, his wealth and innovations didn't. Stewart showed the world that selling goods to the masses could make you richer than royalty. Now we jump back to medieval England, where Henry, Duke of Lancaster, was one of the wealthiest nobles in the entire realm. His fortune is estimated at $160 billion today, and unlike some who inherited their power, Henry earned his status through battle, royal favor, and a sharp eye for opportunity. He owned vast lands across England and France, pulling in huge income from rents, agriculture, and taxes. In an age where wealth was measured in castles and soldiers, Henry had more than most kings. He was also a savvy diplomat, holding some of the highest offices in the realm under King Edward III. People listened when he spoke, not just because of his title, but because of his financial muscle. He lived like royalty, even though he wasn't king, and in many ways, he didn't need the crown. His fortune alone did the talking. Cornelius Vanderbilt started with a small ferry business in New York Harbor, and turned it into a transportation empire worth around $200 billion in today's money. That's not a typo. Known as the Commodore, he began with steamboats, then pivoted to railroads just as America's rail system was exploding. His control over the New York Central Railroad and several others made him the king of East Coast transportation. Vanderbilt didn't just ride the wave of industrial growth, he helped create it. He wasn't known for charity or soft edges, but he was razor sharp when it came to money. At one point, he was earning millions per year in interest alone. His fortune laid the foundation for generations of Vanderbilt wealth, but none matched the scale of what Cornelius built from the ground up. He showed that control over how people and goods move could lead to unimaginable fortune. Henry Ford didn't invent the car, but he made it possible for millions of people to own one. And that's how he built a fortune estimated at around $200 billion in today's dollars. Ford revolutionized manufacturing with the assembly line, cutting the time to build a car from 12 hours to just 90 minutes. That's not just efficiency, it's money-making genius. He also paid his workers higher wages than anyone expected, not out of charity, but because he wanted them to afford the very cars they were building. The Model T changed the world, and Ford's profits reflected that impact. At one point, Ford Motor Company was generating more revenue than most countries. He wasn't just building cars, he was building a system, a movement, and a legacy. His business model shaped the 20th century, and his wealth made him a symbol of American industrial might. Friedrich Weyerhaeuser turned trees into gold, literally. As the founder of what would become one of the largest timber companies in the world, his adjusted net worth sits at around $200 billion. He came to the US from Germany with a dream, and ended up owning over 2 million acres of American forest land. That's more than some US states. Weyerhaeuser didn't just cut down trees, he built an empire around sustainable harvesting, lumber production, and land management. He supplied wood for railroads, housing booms, and industry when demand was skyrocketing. His company was so dominant that its land holdings alone were worth a fortune. Unlike many tycoons of his time, Weyerhaeuser kept a relatively low profile, letting his massive operations and profits speak for themselves. His name might not be as famous as Rockefeller or Ford, but his wealth was right up there with the giants. Jay Gould was the kind of businessman who didn't wait for opportunity. He created it, shaped it, and sometimes forced it. He made his fortune through bold, often ruthless moves in the railroad industry and Wall Street, amassing wealth worth about $210 billion in today's terms. Gould started as a surveyor and bookkeeper, but quickly realized the real money was in controlling railroads and manipulating stock prices. He bought up struggling rail lines, flipped them, merged them, and squeezed out massive profits. His role in the infamous gold market crash of 1869, known as Black Friday, made headlines, but it also showed how much power he truly held. At his peak, he owned significant shares in Union Pacific and Western Union, and was considered one of the most feared financiers of his era. Gould wasn't beloved, but he was rich, and he knew exactly how to play the game to stay that way. Jeff Bezos went from selling books online out of a garage to becoming one of the richest men in the world, with a peak net worth of around $211 billion. He founded Amazon in 1994, and what started as a bookstore quickly grew into the global engine of e-commerce, cloud computing, and logistics. Bezos didn't just create a company, he built an empire that changed how people shop, read, and even watch TV. Amazon's Prime service alone became a cash machine, locking in millions of subscribers. He reinvested profits into warehouses, robotics, and AI, setting Amazon apart from the rest. Then came Blue Origin, his push into space travel, funded by billions in Amazon stock. Bezos also bought the Washington Post and built one of the most powerful business portfolios on Earth. Quiet, methodical, and endlessly ambitious, he rewrote the rules of retail, and walked away with one of the biggest fortunes in history. Elon Musk is the definition of a modern money machine. At his peak, his net worth soared past $320 billion, making him the richest person alive more than once. He didn't just ride one wave, he created several. Musk co-founded PayPal, then took the profits and launched Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and more. He bet big on electric cars when no one else did, and now Tesla is one of the most valuable car makers in the world. SpaceX made space launches cheaper and reusable, and it's on track to lead future missions to the moon and beyond. Musk also stirred headlines with his purchase of X, formerly Twitter, showing he's not afraid to get loud. Whether you admire his genius or question his methods, one thing's undeniable: he built one of the biggest fortunes in history by betting on the future and winning over and over again. Hessian might be the least known name on this list, but his story is one of the most jaw-dropping. As a top official in China's Qing dynasty, he used his position to accumulate personal wealth so massive it would be worth about $370 billion today. You've heard it right, he controlled more money than the entire empire's treasury at one point. Hessian was favored by the Qianlong emperor and rose rapidly through the ranks, gaining access to taxes, land revenues, and public funds. He funneled enormous sums into his own estates, storing gold, silver, jewels, and luxury goods across multiple palaces. His wealth was so extensive that after his fall from grace, it took years to tally what he had hidden. In terms of raw financial control, Hessian was a one-man bank. His fortune wasn't built through business but through absolute political power and unchallenged access. Jakob Fugger wasn't just rich, he was the banker of Europe. Known as Fugger the Rich, his adjusted net worth is estimated at around $400 billion. That makes him one of the wealthiest individuals to ever walk the earth. He wasn't a king or an emperor, but emperors came to him for money. Born into a merchant family in Augsburg, Germany, Jakob took over the family business and expanded it into mining, textiles, and most importantly, banking. He financed the Habsburgs, the Vatican, and even helped Charles V become Holy Roman Emperor by effectively buying votes with loans. Fugger wasn't shy about making deals with power. In return, he was granted exclusive mining rights across Europe, bringing in floods of silver and copper. He also created an early form of financial reporting, holding businesses to standards we'd now call modern. Fugger was more than a merchant. He controlled the money supply for much of Europe. When gold changed hands, his fingerprints were often on it. William the Conqueror wasn't just a cash-generating machine under his absolute control. Alan Rufus, or Alan the Red, was a Norman noble who became one of the richest men in England, thanks to his loyalty to William the Conqueror. His estimated modern net worth sits around $450 billion. That's because he was rewarded with enormous land holdings after the Norman invasion. These weren't scraps. They were some of the most profitable estates in Yorkshire, East Anglia, and beyond. Alan built Richmond Castle and managed one of the largest fiefdoms in the kingdom. He didn't just collect taxes, he controlled entire economies within his territories. What's more, his estate continued to grow even after his death. Alan had no royal title, but his influence was unmatched. At a time when money was tied directly to land and power, Alan Rufus had both. His name doesn't appear in many schoolbooks, but when it comes to wealth, few in history could even come close. John D. Rockefeller was the world's first true billionaire, and he made it look easy. By the time he died, his fortune adjusted to today's dollars was around $470 billion. He built it by founding Standard Oil, which at its height controlled more than 90% of all oil refining in the United States. That's more than just dominance, it was a near monopoly. He bought competitors, cut deals, and refined business efficiency to a science. He didn't flash his wealth, but he never needed to. Rockefeller had so much money he literally struggled to give it away fast enough. His philanthropic legacy includes the University of Chicago, Rockefeller University, and countless medical research centers. Yet it was his business acumen, his laser focus on profit, scale, and control, that made him legendary. Oil powered the modern world, and Rockefeller owned the pipelines. In a world built on energy, he was the man who owned the fuel. Andrew Carnegie started life in a one-room cottage in Scotland and ended up one of the richest people in history, with a modern net worth estimated at around $480 billion. He immigrated to the US with almost nothing, worked as a bobbin boy in a cotton factory, and slowly climbed his way up through smart investments and relentless drive. But it was steel that made him a fortune. Carnegie Steel became the largest and most profitable steel company in the world, fueling America's railroads, bridges, and buildings during a time of explosive growth. In 1901, He sold the company to J.P. Morgan for $480 million, a deal so massive it formed U.S. Steel. Carnegie retired from business and became one of the biggest philanthropists of all time, building libraries, universities, and foundations across the world. Still, it was his sharp sense for timing, scale, and cost-cutting that made him the ultimate steel tycoon. Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, held an empire so vast that his personal and state-controlled wealth is estimated today at around $500 billion. While not a self-made magnate, he inherited massive resources, palaces, jewels, gold reserves, and the power to tax over 100 million people. The Romanov family owned thousands of square miles of land, forests, and mines across the Russian Empire. Nicholas lived in unmatched luxury, from the Winter Palace to Levadia, surrounded by Fabergé eggs, royal yachts, and armies of servants. His reign came during a time of deep social unrest, but the royal finances remained enormous. Even state industries were effectively under his control. His fortune was tightly tied to the crown. When he lost it, the wealth came under threat. Still, for decades, Nicholas II stood as one of the richest monarchs in the world, ruling an empire built on resources, labor, and legacy. Mir Osman Ali Khan, the last Nizam of Hyderabad, ruled a state so rich in jewels and resources that his net worth is estimated at around $500 billion. He wasn't a businessman or a tech mogul. He was royalty, sitting atop one of the wealthiest princely states in the world. His fortune included over 100 million pounds of gold and silver, a fleet of Rolls-Royces, and the legendary Jacob Diamond, used casually as a paperweight in his office. The state of Hyderabad minted its own currency, had its own army, and even operated its own railway. Osman Ali Khan funded hospitals, universities, and infrastructure with ease, all while expanding his personal collection of gems and treasures. His control over vast landholdings and mineral-rich regions meant constant revenue. Even after India's independence, his financial legacy stood out. He was the richest man in the world during his time, and one of the quietest billionaires in history. Augustus Caesar wasn't just the first emperor of Rome, he was also one of the wealthiest men to ever live, with a net worth that could exceed $5 trillion in today's money. After the fall of the Roman Republic, Augustus took control of nearly a quarter of the known world's economy. He personally owned Egypt, which supplied the empire with massive grain reserves and gold. Revenue from taxes, conquests, and trade flowed directly to him. Augustus wasn't reckless. He used his wealth to fund roads, military campaigns, and grand architecture that still stands today. He paid his armies personally, secured political loyalty through massive donations, and managed the empire like a business. His economic power was so large, it influenced everything from currency to foreign policy. When you control the economy of the world's largest empire and can write your own laws, money follows. Augustus didn't just rule Rome, he financially owned it. Akbar the Great ruled over one of the richest and most powerful empires of the 16th century, and his personal wealth is estimated around $21 trillion when adjusted for global GDP share. He controlled over 25% of the world's economy during his reign as the third Mughal emperor of India. But Akbar wasn't just a collector of riches, he was a skilled administrator and reformer. His empire generated wealth through trade, agriculture, and a well-organized tax system. Massive treasuries, priceless artwork, and luxury palaces were just part of his empire's wealth. Akbar invited scholars, artists, and merchants from across Asia and the Middle East, turning his court into a cultural and financial capital. He also standardized currency and expanded trade routes, pulling in revenue from Persia to China. Akbar's grip on wealth was matched only by his political genius. Few rulers in history controlled as much real-world value, and even fewer did it with such ambition. Emperor Shenzong of Song ruled over one of the most economically advanced societies in the world. And his personal and imperial wealth is estimated at around $30 trillion when adjusted for the share of global GDP. During his reign, China wasn't just rich, it was a financial powerhouse. The Song dynasty pioneered paper money, operated a complex banking system, and led the world in iron production, textiles, and trade. Shenzong had control over a vast tax base, massive state-run industries, and bustling trade networks that stretched from Southeast Asia to the Middle East. Revenue flowed into the imperial treasury from land taxes, salt monopolies, and silk exports. He also supported sweeping reforms under his famous minister Wang Anshi, aiming to boost agricultural productivity and stabilize prices. Shenzong's empire didn't just accumulate wealth, it produced it on an industrial scale. His rule marked a high point in medieval Chinese prosperity, where one man sat atop the most advanced economy on earth. Mansa Musa isn't just another name on this list, he's the gold standard of historical wealth. As the emperor of the Mali Empire, his fortune is widely believed to be the largest personal wealth ever accumulated. Modern estimates place it as incalculable, but many historians agree it easily exceeds $400 billion and possibly even over $1 trillion in real-world value. Why so much? Because Musa controlled nearly half of the entire world's gold supply at the time. Gold wasn't just a luxury, it was the global currency, and he owned the mines producing it in massive quantities. His most famous moment came during his pilgrimage to Mecca. As he passed through Cairo, he handed out so much gold to the people that it caused a regional economic collapse. Gold lost value for over a decade. That's how much wealth he had. He could crash a country's economy just by being generous. And he didn't just spend, he built. Musa funded the construction of grand mosques, universities and libraries across Timbuktu and Gao, turning his empire into a hub for education and trade. His legacy isn't just about being rich, it's about how far that wealth stretched, how it shaped cities, cultures and economies. When people say someone is richer than Mansa Musa, it's usually a myth. No one before or since has matched his level of wealth, power and global impact. Or the lasting imprint of his rule. That's about it. How much money do you spend per month? Write in the comments. For more useful information, watch other videos.